And the Washington County Quorum Court is now called into session. We, again, welcome you all. We have a pretty packed meeting, agenda items tonight. We're going to go ahead and start with a prayer and pledge. We're going to ask J.P. Duncan, would you lead us in the prayer and pledge?
I'm good.
Okay.
Father God, thank you so much for all the privileges that we have to live in such a beautiful county, God, in a great state, God, in the world's greatest country. Lord, we are so thankful for your goodness. God, we praise your holiness and your perfection. Lord, we are thankful for Christ Jesus and his perfect life and death on the cross for our sins, God. Lord, we pray for wisdom tonight as we conduct county business. God, I pray that you would be with the judge as he oversees the meeting. God, give JP's wisdom as we make decisions. And God, we just thank you for the opportunity to serve. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, J.P. Duncan. All right. We'll go ahead and start item 2. We have the prayer and pledge. 3, we got the adoption of the agenda. With that, we need to remove items 9 through 11. Items 9 through 11. The appellant who initially had a request is asked to remove that from the agenda. They're not flying in. So anyway, remove items 9 through 11. With that, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? I have a motion by J.P. Lemming to approve the agenda as amended, second by J.P. Duncan. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? All right, that motion passed. The amended agenda has been approved. Item 4, preliminary motions. Are there any preliminary motions? This is where we ask to have ordinances and resolutions read by title only. J.P. Lemming, and second, is there second? Second by J.P. Duncan. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? All opposed? All in favor? All right, so the preliminary motion does pass.
I just wanted clarification for a second. Could you explain to the audience what we just did on 9 through?
On items 9 through 11, those items were removed from the agenda. The appeal, the applicant who made the appeal decided not to appeal it. So he's not coming in, he's not flying in to remove that. All right?
Thank you, Judge.
Okay. I guess I missed that.
For the cell tower. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so where were we? So we got the approval of the minutes. Approval of the minutes. Did I miss 5? I did. We have citizen comments at this point. We ask citizens to come forward. You have a lot of time as our county ordinance asks citizens they can come and share and visit with the county, the JPs, the judge. They'll have a total of 3 minutes. We ask that you go ahead and state your name and tell us where you live.
Good evening, Josh. Fayetteville, Arkansas. Sebastian County is actively looking at implementing detention alternatives, including drug, veteran, and mental health courts, continuing the CSU, alternative sentencing and diversion, accelerated court dockets, electronic monitoring, and signature bonds for nonviolent felonies, and even a cap on number of people detained. These ideas should all sound familiar to you. Benton County is having multiple meetings right now to brainstorm how to spend American Rescue Plan funds on county facilities, public health and economic recovery, county workforce, infrastructure, and the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee. And they are reaching out to nonprofits and other organizations to determine need. Both of these nearby counties are engaging the public and coming up with real solutions together. Meanwhile, we constantly reject investments that could make a real difference right now in our community. Why not use CARES or ARP funds to reopen the Crisis Stabilization Unit? We can no longer pretend that this current quorum court is comprised mostly of good stewards of our tax dollars, We spent $60,000 on a study to determine best next steps in our justice system and are refusing to implement those steps before trying to expand the jail. We nickel and dime and interrogate some departments or dismantle them altogether, even though they run or ran at a fraction of the cost of the jail. Throwing money at the jail is not the solution when there are ample other opportunities to reach a better end. We were able to reduce the detention numbers in spring of 20 in an emergency. We're still in that same emergency. Do we as a community feel any safer now that the number of people detained has gone back up? Jail expansion for COVID is an expensive permanent solution to a temporary problem. We'll likely be on the other side of this pandemic before we would even break ground on the proposal. This is a disingenuous attempt to expand government rather than limit it. And if we were to expand the jail in order to fully staff the already understaffed department, we'd have to raise the wages continuously and spend more money without actually addressing or resolving any of the root causes of criminality. That's government overreach at its worst. This is supposed to be the land of the free, but instead is home of the incarcerated. Shutting down dissenting opinions, motions, resolutions, ordinances, and voices of some JPs who don't resemble the majority of this court with little to no discussion is a dereliction of duty and overall lack of civil discourse. Pushing through partisan items with little to no discussion while simultaneously demanding raises for the already highest paid county employees who happen to be of the same party is not inspiring public confidence either. There has been a severe lack of leadership, vision, and sense of overall public service within the majority of this court. I'm tired of partisan politics. I'm willing to bet that the majority of Washington County is too. Fortunately, 22 is just around the corner. Change is going to come. I just hope it's not too late. Thank you.
Citizen comments. Citizen comments. Good evening. Go ahead and state your name and where you live.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Julie Stenkin. I have a PhD in analytical chemistry, and I live on High Avenue in Fayetteville, Arkansas. This is my first meeting. I have watched and listened and read about the various things that have been discussed in this court. I have sent Mr. Duncan, who is my rep, numerous ideas for CARES Act money, and he has not acknowledged me at all, period. As an analytical chemist who knows about rapid testing, that is one way that we can help control the absolute raging virus that is happening in our county and our state. I would ask that the Quorum Court consider buying a number of the Abbott rapid tests that have been FDA approved to test for coronavirus in our children who are in school, and for any parents who would like these tests for their children so that we can try to stamp down this virus. It is one way that we can do it. As you probably know, we have a lot of people who are on free and reduced lunch in this county who are not able to afford a lot of different things. This would give them some peace of mind to test their children and make sure that the virus is not raging through our community. Thank you for your attention. I really hope you will seriously consider using the CARES Fund money for COVID relief. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, come forward and tell us your name and where you live.
Hello, my name is Alice Gachuzo-Colleen, and I live on Shady Good Road in Springdale. I don't really have a whole big speech. I just have a couple of things to say. First thing is in 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "I ask you, America, to be true to what you put on paper." So I am asking respectfully that the Quorum Court is true to what is put on paper. It is a cruel just to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself up by his bootstraps. So I'm asking the Quorum Court, how would you expect citizens of Washington County to lift themselves up out of something so terrible that they've done nothing to themselves? The money is there. Why would you not help them? That's it.
Thank you. Citizen comments? Citizen comments.
I'm Richard Tiffany. I live in Fayetteville. I've been helping homeless people for several years at a camp. The population of the camp has increased significantly the last year and a half since COVID has come more than triple. Several regulars in the camp have mental health issues. 2 women I know happen to be in the county jail at the moment. Others have been in and out. Monday last week, the jail committee hearing, Sheriff Helder said typical residents have 11 charges, an example of criminality of the people he's holding. When you're homeless, particularly with mental health issues, surviving through the day is the primary focus. You may not know what day of the week it is, much less what day of the month. If you're released from jail before the court date and you don't know what day it is, you're not likely to show up. If you're sentenced with a fine and you're homeless, not sure where your next meal is coming from, you're not likely to make a payment on your fine. Either way, a warrant will be issued and you're back in jail. Cycling people like this in and out of the jail doesn't help anyone. It only deepens the pit of despair these people are living in, a pit these people are going to have to climb out of to get their life together. I know some of you think that building a bigger jail to house the increased homeless population of the county is what needs to be done. After all, these are really dangerous people, as shown by the high bond set for a failure to appear. But I am here to suggest that providing mental health services to help these people climb out of their pit would be money better spent. I know that there are others in the jail who do not fit this profile, but Helder in his original jail expansion proposal claimed that around a quarter of the jail population have mental illness. I recognize that the sheriff does not have much to say on who is arrested or released, but you could. If there was a proper mental health care in the county, it would free up much of the space as the proposed jail expansion. Of course, it would take some real leadership to come up with a program that would actually help people instead of the current cycle in and out of jail that only digs the pit deeper. I hope you stop and consider other possibilities that would better serve the people of Washington County than expansion of the jail. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comments, citizen comments.
Good
Good evening.
evening. My name's Madeline Porta. I'm a Washington County resident, and I wanted to just kind of build on some of the things that have been said, especially around failures to appear and people being rearrested. So those are complicated issues, which are exacerbated by dated policies by all actors in the system. Currently, the jail has 216, well, a few hours ago, 216 people in the jail were there for failure to appear. Judges are setting the bonds for failure to appear, so that's missing a court date on probably a low-level felony, not always, but sometimes. And they're setting the bonds at $25,000 to $50,000, which is completely unattainable for people. So we have our jail full of people that have missed court after, or allegedly missed court, after a pandemic during which our court was closed for the entire year with no reset or no communication that was happening to people who had cases during this time. People are having their cases adjourned without failing to appear for 2 years and more. And there's currently also no incentive for people to turn themselves in or to return themselves on these warrants. The bonds are being set at the same amount, whether the person gets picked up on a new offense or whether the person turns themselves in and tries to take responsibility. So I think there are thousands of options to consider that are not expanding the jail. Some of them have been mentioned. Reopening the CSU. Some haven't been mentioned. We need to be talking about warrant amnesty events, chances for people to come in and clear their warrants and be able to get back on in good standing on their criminal case without clogging up the jail. Again, there are thousands of solutions. The Criminal Justice Committee is just starting to get up and running. They're having their first public meeting for a while, next week, I believe. And I've been working with criminal justice coordinating committees in other areas and learning about other criminal justice coordinating committees and what can come out of those when they're well-run and when they're invested in creating and coming up with solutions in the community to address all of the complicated issues that people face when they're coming in and out of the criminal system. So I would urge you to vote against the ordinance, which would be saying this one solution after not looking at the thousands of other possibilities that we could be doing besides this one thing, which we know can be extremely harmful, to consider all of these options. And the fact, I just also want everyone to know that people in the community are working on this tirelessly. We are meeting together and working on these issues. So we need to know that you're working with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, with that, we'll move on to item 7, the judge's report. You have in your package the disposal report, and then I just want to make sure there's a reminder. We'll post it also online that on September 11, I know many people will be attending some of the 9/11 commemoration remembrance. We'll be doing a groundbreaking ceremony at the corner of North and College on 9/11 at 10 o'clock in the morning. Again, that's the groundbreaking ceremony for the Patriot Park, and then we'll end up having a 9/11 remembrance ceremony at 11 following that groundbreaking. We'll put that out online for you guys. Oh, got it. All right, that's the judge's report. I did miss approving the minutes. Approval of the minutes, a motion to approve the minutes. Is that second? So JP Lemming and second by JP Wilson. So we got the minutes approved. Item 8, we'll go at 8. Yes.
Can you turn me on? Thank you.
I was just curious. I had asked Mr. Lester.
What happened? Go ahead, put it back on. There you go. It's still not?
About the groundbreaking for the Patriot Park, I had asked Mr. Lester during a meeting, recent meeting, when the Quorum Court heard about this project for the very first time. I had asked if it had gone through the city planning process, and he assured me it had. When I checked with the director of planning and the mayor, the city knew nothing about it. And so I was curious what plans we had submitted to the city to make sure we were complying with setbacks. I know not all of city planning obligations apply to the county, but I was assured there were some that did apply. And I was very concerned that Mr. Lester had told me that it had been approved when it had not. So I'm curious about the planning process for the Patriot Park.
I will have to connect back with you. I know, because the people who are putting the project together did work with the city, what their conversation was, what their relation, I have to share that with you, but they obviously be able to do a groundbreaking with the city and all, but they did not, so I'll get that back with you.
My next question is, could we start having periodic reports on changeover in the county leadership? Because I've been concerned that our planning director has resigned, our HR director has resigned, our road superintendent has resigned. He has been replaced, but we don't have an assistant road superintendent. There seems to be a lot of turnover in leadership positions in the county, and I hear about it like because someone says, hey, there's an HR director job posted for the county. What does that mean? And I think the JP should at least know about those positions and what's happening. I mean, the lack of a planning director is important, but I'm very concerned about what I'm hearing about the road department. Just in the past 2 weeks, my understanding is 7 employees have resigned, and a lot of that is for pay, and the court needs to be addressing pay because we are losing people to $20 an hour truck driver positions. If anyone, especially I'm sure JP Johnson knows, the construction industry is going great guns right now, and we are losing all of our road department employees, and morale is in the tank down there. And I think we need to be more open about what's happening with turnover in our county positions, and I would appreciate being notified when we lose one of our leadership positions. So,
Thank you,
Thank
JP
you.
Madison. We'll go ahead and move to item 9, or item 8 rather, and that's Council, first of all, go ahead and read that by title only, and then we'll go to J.P. Wilson.
An ordinance repealing ordinance 2016-268 and setting the salaries of the executive branch.
And J.P. Wilson. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. So this was the second reading, and I would say I would ask that we go ahead and take it to third reading next month.
All right, we'll go ahead and move that one to next month for the third and final reading. Item 9, item 10, and item 11 has been removed from the agenda. Item 12, Council, will you read that one by ordinance only, by title only?
An ordinance appropriating $250,000 from American Rescue Plan Fund 3046 to the small equipment line item in the American Rescue Plan budget 30460568 for 2021.
J.P. Deacons.
Thank you, Judge Wood. This is funds to purchase new tablets for the Election Commission that they use. I think we've all, when we go in and register to vote, it's the tablets that they use to intake. This is going to help us out too because it increases the touchless capabilities of that. So hopefully that'll help mitigate the risk of spreading the COVID. And then also, I think this is timely because Bentonville is also undertaking this, Benton County is also undertaking this expenditure, and so there's some coordination that we can do with them to save some money on training and that type of thing. So I move passage of item 12.
There's a motion to pass item 12, a second by J.P. Ecke. Any discussion? Any discussion? J.P. Rio Stafford?
Yes, thank you, Judge Wood. I just wanted to note that this and a couple of other items on our agenda tonight are going to be our first time appropriating any sort of money out of the American Rescue Plan funds that we're getting, which is, for the public to know, is about $23 million this year and another $23 million next year. While I'm in favor of this particular ordinance because I think it's needed for the elections, I have to say that I am disappointed that we haven't yet had a broader discussion about how we're going to use the American Rescue Plan funds. I will contrast the way we're going about this with the way our neighbors up in the north in Benton County. They're having a series of facilitated public meetings that started this week. They're having 4 different meetings. They broke it into public health, employees, infrastructure, and the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee. I think that we need to have a greater discussion about what is our collective game plan for this money. I've asked previously for the Budget Committee to have this discussion back in June. I got turned down by J.P. Deacons, who chairs that committee, telling me that, for one, that the rules guiding the use of this money are only interim rules. Well, they're still interim rules today, right now. So to me, that didn't really carry water. We're looking at appropriating this money anyway under interim rules. My question to you, Judge Wood, is your office willing to be part of a facilitated discussion here in our county, such as Benton County is having?
Yes. And we will. That will be happening. Well, we have an ordinance, we have a discussion piece going on. The interim guidelines have not. We just had meetings again. We are still waiting on interim guidelines. That being aside, we will pull together the folks that we want to have come in, help facilitate and present that information so we can invite the public as well as the JPs. So yes, your request, you haven't come in. I know you said you mentioned something to the finance and budget, but definitely we want to have that, and it will happen. We got to figure out how we're going to do it, And so that's what we're working on. Yes. All right. Any other discussion? Oh, any other discussions? Any other discussion? All right, now we can go to public comments. Oh, I'm sorry, JP Madison.
Thank you, Judge. I share JP Rio Stafford's sentiments in that I support this particular funding item. I was actually the sponsor of the Vote Center ordinance several years ago, and so it delights me when people say, oh, where do I have to go vote? And I say, you can go vote anywhere because we have vote centers. And they're like, oh, that's so cool. And I think that these tablets will facilitate that process. And so I fully support this expenditure, but we very much owe the people of Washington County a robust discussion, a comprehensive discussion of the expenditures of these funds. I see things like sheriff's offices offering incentives to folks to get vaccinated. I see governments, municipalities, counties offering employees bonuses to show proof of vaccinations. We have so many options at our fingertips to spend $23 million in a way that truly combats the pandemic. But I know the Election Commission has worked diligently to keep elections on track during the pandemic, and we've had great turnout in our elections despite the pandemic. So I support this, but echo JP Rio Stafford's sentiments about having a full discussion. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you. Public comments. Public comments. Tell us who you are and where you live.
Hi, Sarah Moore, Fayetteville, Arkansas. I appreciate the discussion around and what's been brought up by JP Madison and Rio Stafford in regard to having a full conversation. And thank you, Judge, for acknowledging that we could set a best practice by having a full conversation and looking at the portfolio of options for what we can spend this money on. My concern is timing. I mean, it's urgent to start having those conversations now. Myself, like you today, I attended the Association of Counties meetings up in Rogers, and I was able to sit through the American Rescue Plan session that was run today. And there are a lot of questions still. It sounds like a lot of counties are figuring it out. And when you talk to different counties, they're not moving forward with where they're going to spend the money because they do know that the rules at this time are interim. Now there's concern about when they will be final, but I think there are enough concerns and questions that we should be tabling at this point in any spending that we're doing, because we do need to assess how much money, if we nickel and dime, even if it's a good idea, at the end of the day, if we determine that there's a big need in a certain bucket and it needs X amount of dollars, they may not be available. So I'm really asking today, given the guidance, and we usually weigh very heavily what Association of Counties said, I was talking with the presenter afterwards, and she said a best practice is definitely Benton County. Benton County is not appropriating any funds at this time. They're actually going through the series of meetings first. So I'm saying to please pause on any of the ordinances going forward, please. Please consider this heavily. This is a windfall of money. I know that you guys want to be fiscally responsible. I know that it's important that you make sure that these dollars go to the appropriate places in our community. Over the last several years with some of you JPs, I've spent lots of time talking about the areas in our communities that are really suffering and struggling, and we've wanted to address these, and we have the opportunity today. If we make decisions and move forward, we can't go back once we start down the path of taking some of these monies forward. And additionally, we have to be concerned as citizens, as taxpayers, and yourself as well, because if those rules come back and it does not meet criteria, the county pays the money back. Right now, we have a very healthy reserve, and I'm very proud that we've been able to manage our finances in this county. But that's very uncertain if we start going after projects not fully understanding what the rules will be going forward. So I really ask for your full consideration tonight to pause on the ordinances going forward, and let's get those meetings scheduled first. Thank you.
Public comments? Public comments. Ms. Patty? This is on the passage of ordinance item number 12. Oh, no, this is only on its first read. Well, yeah, go ahead, Ms. Patty.
Eva Madison. Yes. Robert Dennis. Yes. Suki Hires. Yes. Evelyn Rio Stafford. Yes. Willie Lemming. Yes. Jim Wilson. Yes. Butch Pond. Yes. Lance Johnson.
Yes.
Shannon Marty. Sean Simons. Bill Usry. Patrick Deakins. Lisa Ecke. Sam Duncan.
Yes.
Shonda Washington.
Yes.
This ordinance passes.
All right, item 12 passes. We'll move to item 13. Council, will you read that one by title only?
An ordinance appropriating $3,750 from unappropriated reserves in the general fund to the other professional services line item in the Circuit Court 8 budget for 2021.
J.P. Deakins.
Thank you, Judge Wood. This is for Judge Warren's court. When they put together the 2021 budget for the new judge, they had omitted some professional services, and she's needing some translation services to help in her court. So I move passage of item number 13.
There's a motion to pass item 13 by J.P. Deakins, a second by J.P. Pond. Any discussion? Any discussion? Public comments? Public comments? Ms. Patty?
Eva Madison.
Yes.
Robert Dennis.
Yes.
Suki Hires. Evelyn Rowe Stafford. Willie Lemming. Jim Wilson.
Yes.
Butch Pond.
Yes.
Lance Johnson.
Yes.
Shannon Marty. Sean Simons. Bill Usry.
Yes.
Patrick Deakins.
Yes.
Lisa Ecke.
Yes.
Sam Duncan.
Yes.
Shonda Washington.
Yes.
This ordinance passes.
Thank you, Ms. Patty. All right, we'll move on to item 14. Item 14, Council, will you read that one by title only?
An ordinance appropriating $125,000 from unappropriated reserves in the general fund 1,000 to the other professional services line item 3,009 in the buildings and grounds budget 1000108 for 2021.
J.P. Johnson. Go ahead.
As everyone is aware, we have a problem with the elevator in the annex building that serves the public defender's office. It's been determined that that elevator cannot be repaired and it needs to be replaced, and I move we pass this ordinance.
There's a motion by Lance, J.P. Johnson, a second by J.P. Wilson. Any discussion? Any? J.P. Simon?
Thank you, Judge. I think I asked this question when it first came up, and I haven't got a clear answer. Has anybody looked into seeing if the cause of this issue is something that's covered under our insurance? I mean, we don't have a great track record on insurance claims.
I know
at the
they
moment,
looked at that, but I think it's the people who did the elevator no longer does that, and so we have to piecemeal it and have been, and so they're just going to pull the whole thing out. Any other discussion? J.P. Rio Stafford?
Yes, thank you, Judge. I just wanted to note that I'm glad that we're doing this. Kind of to recap for some members of the public who may not be aware, this is the building over in the annex. The public defender is up on the second floor of that building, and it's the main way that clients get up to go meet with the public defender. We've heard some unfortunate stories, for example, of a disabled person who had to pull themselves up the stairs in order to meet with their attorney. We heard about a potential hire in the office who was disabled, and they had to go do the interview out in the parking lot, which may have discouraged them from taking the job. Who knows? But you know, this is overdue, and I support this.
Any other discussion? Public comments? Public comments? Ms. Patty?
Eva Madison.
Yes.
Robert Dennis.
Yes.
Suki Hires.
Yes.
Evelyn Rio Stafford. Willie Lemming.
Yes.
Jim Wilson.
Yes.
Butch Pond.
Yes.
Lance Johnson.
Yes.
Shannon Marty. Sean Simons.
Yes.
Bill Usry.
Yes.
Patrick Deakins.
Yes.
Lisa Ecke. Sam Duncan.
Yes.
Shonda Washington.
Yes.
This ordinance passes.
Item 14 passes. Thank you, Ms. Patty. Item 15. Council, will you read that one by title only?
An ordinance appropriating $250,000 from the American Rescue Plan Act Fund 3046 to the Engineering Architecture line item 3004 in the American Rescue Plan Act budget 304605683004 for 2021.
JP Lance Johnson.
Thank you, Judge. As everybody's aware, I think it was 2 full years ago, our intent was to have this project done at the Juvenile Justice Center to both take care of some safety issues that go on there, plus provide a new courtroom for Judge Warren. And we've for sure proven that the current situation isn't the most economically feasible way to handle those 2 courts today. So what this ordinance will do is get the design process started again that was halted 2 years ago, so that we can get on with that project, and I move to pass.
I have a motion by JP Johnson, second by JP Dennis. Any discussion? JP Madison.
While I support the renovations that have been long needed at Judge Zimmerman's courtroom, and I support the moving of Judge Warren down to where the juvenile detention center is, I cannot support this tonight for several reasons. Number one, when we were on the cusp of building this center with bond money based on fines and fees line item, there was never any mention of needing to spend $250,000 on architectural plans. We were poised to approve bonds right as COVID was hitting, and they pulled it because they thought that the fines and fees might dry up, and they did. So that was a wise decision, but we were poised to fund the full project without any discussion of $250,000 for architectural plans. And I'm sort of offended that it costs that much to get architectural plans. I think Judge Zimmerman has brought us plans that she had herself. And if we were on the cusp of about to approve a $4.5 million expenditure to build this building, were we really going to do it without architectural plans? So I think this is one where we got to draw the line and say we need to have a robust discussion about how we're going to spend the American Rescue Plan funds. We could have been talking about the CARES money being used for a juvenile justice center. Pastor Clint Schneckloff and I met with the judge and Brian Lester about that back April 1st and actually thought that sounded like a pretty good use of CARES Funds Act. That was April 1st. What is it today? August 19th. And we know what they're going to try to do with the CARES funds. So we need to find a better way to build this juvenile justice building. It was a building that we needed regardless of COVID. So to spend American Rescue Plan money on it is wrong.
JP Hires. JP Pond and then JP Hires. I'm sorry. JP Pond and then JP Hires.
Yes, thank you. This may be a question that you may have already have the answer, but I believe it's state law that if you're going to do some kind of a structure, be it a bridge, a building, or whatever it is, of a certain amount of money, that you're required to have an architect and an engineer. And I don't know what that amount of money is, but the county attorney might know.
And that's correct. And obviously with rescue plan dollars, it's going to be even more so that you have architects and design that's going to be approved when it goes to the federal audit. So
I believe if you get up to the point of $150,000, but that might not be the correct amount, you got to hire an engineer, an architect. Thank you.
JP Hires.
I had actually unraised my hand, thank you, Judge, because.
sorry.
Well, I had unraised my hand
Okay.
because JP Madison said everything
Okay.
that I wanted to say. But I am also concerned when we're talking about these interim rules, if this is something that will be approved in the final rescue plan, I would really like to see us take a pause on any more spending out of the American Rescue Plan, form a committee, quite like we've seen our neighbors in Benton County do, and really consider what we're doing with this money and making sure that we're spending it appropriately in a way that it's not going to come back on us, that we're not going to have to repay that money out of our reserves. So I'm very worried about this. Thank you.
Any other discussion? JP Lemming?
I just wanted to state, I think the reason that we're having to hire an architect now is because Carl Gills is not here, and he was the one that was doing that building before. Is that right or wrong?
No. Again, we got to do this because of rescue plan. I've been sitting on the chair for working with this for a few years, but some of that interim is who's going to be doing this. If you're going to be doing any type of construction, you got to have architects who's going to be able to meet the requirements that's going to be required when you go through your federal audit. So even if it was Gales, I don't know if he would have been able to do the same, meet the same requirements. Any other discussion? Public? JP Stafford, Rhea Stafford.
Thank you, Judge Wood. You know, I agree that, you know, it sounds like Judge Warren, you know, needs a real courtroom down there. But I also agree that, you know, this may not be the right pot of money. If we were already looking at this in 2019 before we had these funds. You know, and also I wanted to know, when we heard about this, we heard about how there were 43,000 people who came through the Juvenile Justice Center in 2019, young people, their families, and things like that. And so one of the things that I hope that our Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee is working on is dismantling the school-to-prison pipeline so that we can reduce those numbers.
Any other discussion? Public comments? Public comments?
Gladys Tiffany, Fayetteville. I just want to make the point that it looks really uncomfortable to me to be, so we're requesting $250,000 from the American Rescue Plan Fund for this engineering, and nothing here has indicated what exactly is supposed to be happening with that. Every single appropriation to the American Rescue Plan Act is $250,000. I'd really like to know why this nice round number has been pulled out of the air for everything that has to do with the American Rescue Plan money.
Thank you. Public comments? Public comments?
Hello, my name is Lynn Carver. I live in Springdale. And today was the first day that I learned that there was a proposed $250,000 request for architectural funds. And while I don't have a particular feeling about whether the space is needed or not, I'm being educated tonight that we need that. But as a taxpayer, listening to the confusion about how how appropriate it might be to use this particular pot of money for that particular purpose gives me a lot of pause. And I would just say that as a citizen, I am very concerned that we use money that is designated to help with expenses related directly to COVID go for that purpose and that purpose only. And I don't feel like the people sitting here who are representing us have a really good handle on whether it would be allowed or not be allowed. And if you haven't had public comment, if you haven't given citizens like me an opportunity to say, we think this is a good idea or we don't think it's a good idea in terms of how you spend our tax dollars, I think I would ask you to pause and give it some more consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comments? Public comments? Public comments? JP Madison. Go ahead.
My name is Samuel Rivera Lopez, and I'm from Springdale. And
In February, when the snowstorm came through, it froze the pipes in my neighborhood. We're talking about 140 residencies. Approximately, on average, about 3 to 4 people. So we're talking about maybe 500 to 600 people living in a small area in Springdale. Now, the bad thing about that is a private lot, but the gas lines broke, and people were left without heat. People were left without water in some cases. 70 residencies were left without gas for over 90 days. Now, we're talking about a community of mostly Latin people. Now, we went to our city government, and nobody really did anything for us. We had to sit there and try to raise money, and we raised a little bit over $2,500 to give people food that were in need. That should not happen here. That should not happen in one of the wealthiest places in the state. And one, I shouldn't have to ask anybody for help. People should be ready to help. My point is, we have relationships. There's no way that you live 2 miles from the university. Faye Jones' School of Architecture is right there, and we can't build relationships with people that can offer the benefits of their knowledge. We are a community that could take this $250,000 and exponentially drive its potential with just the right words, with just the right actions. And being intentional and being transparent. If we talk about what we need, we all want the same thing. Pretty sure we all want to be prosperous. I'm pretty sure we all want to protect each other. We're fighting an enemy we can't see. All we got to do is be together. All we got to do is talk about what we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez.
My name is Lou Reed Sharp, and I just want to make a comment. All of these ordinances talk about appropriating money from the American Rescue Plan Act budget. There is no budget, and I really implore the courts to come up with a budget with public input so that we can make some of these decisions. Because as far as I can see, you just got a pot of money, but there's no budget. So maybe the ordinance needs to be retitled also. Thank you.
Public comments. Public comments?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mariah Green from Fayetteville. And I just had a quick question. I know that we've talked about the fact that there's not like a public budget. So, forgive me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding, this funding is to directly help stimulate our economy and directly help families and people, particularly marginalized people, whether it's socioeconomic, people of color, whatever the case may be, endure this really, really trying time. So as my peer over here said, we're supposed to be in this together. And so far, again, without a budget, I really can't say where all the money's being spent or where it's aiming to be spent, but so far it's all on technology and architecture, but not people, right?
Hold tight. Can we let them speak? When you want an opportunity to come and visit, we'll have you come, but we want to make sure we're respectful and allow people to speak and talk without interruption. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Thanks. But and it'd be different if we're talking about housing where people live, right? And that's the architecture that we're focused on. And so that's something that I would implore. I would implore that, if we're going to go ahead and spend funds without a budget, to really focus on the purpose of the funds and where they're going. And I think that's what the community is saying. There's not a lot of transparency on where the money's going. And I don't think it's very clear on why it's being allocated to infrastructures that don't directly impact people that have been really, really impacted by the pandemic. And I think that's something that Fayetteville should honor. I think Fayetteville does honor its residents, and it's something that we should really consider. So, thank you.
Thank you. Public comments? Public comments. Ms. Patty?
Kiva Madison? No. Robert Dennis? Yes. Suki Hires? No. Evelyn Rio Stafford? No. Willie Lemming? Yes. Jim Wilson? Yes. Butch Pond? Yes. Lance Johnson?
Yes.
Shannon Marty? Yes. Sean Simons? Yes. Bill Usry? Yes. Patrick Deakins? Yes. Lisa Ecke? Yes. Sam Duncan?
Yes.
Shonda Washington?
No.
This ordinance passes.
All right, item 15 passes. We'll move to item 16. Counselor, will you read that one by title only?
An ordinance appropriating $250,000 from the American Rescue Plan Act Fund 3046 to the Engineering Architecture line item 3004 in the American Rescue Plan Act budget 304605683004 for 2021.
JP Deakins. JP Deakins. Did I hit it? There we go.
There he goes. Thank you, Judge Wood. I have a couple comments on this, after receiving some feedback from the public and things like that. I'm excited about where Washington County is headed in our criminal justice journey. I was a big proponent of doing the criminal justice study. I'm very excited to see what the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee's doing. I think there's a lot of good things that can come out of that. And I'm going to be a proponent to keep doing that. The idea that we are needing to modify our jail is not an end-all be-all. It's not a silver bullet. It's not the final chapter in this by any means. And I want to reiterate something. At the county level is vested the power to run the jail through the sheriff's department. And it's our responsibility to appropriate and fund that jail. And so I take that very heavily, that at our level, that's what we are here to do. And we have a responsibility to fund that. And we have a responsibility to ensure the safety of our detention officers and even the inmates in there and the public as a whole. And, this ordinance will get money started to get the architectural and engineering and the plans laid out for what this modification could be. And that allows us oversight in the future to monitor this process and keep working with the sheriff and his staff to do this the right way. This money is not a windfall. It's not a pot of money that was gifted to us. At best, it's the taxpayers' money. But it's probably printed or borrowed. And so I feel like we have the responsibility first for the safety of our employees in the county and to do the essential services that we are here to do, vested in us constitutionally. And the jail is absolutely one of those. Every citizen in Washington County benefits from the jail and the law enforcement that we can provide and the safety that provides our county as a whole and our populations as a whole. And I move passage of this because this is a critical need right now. We've heard it communicated from the sheriff and his staff, and it'll be something that we need to get started on because this is a very long endeavor to go through, and I think it's very timely that we get going on this. So I move passage of this item, Judge Wood.
Got a motion to pass item 16, a second by JP Johnson. Discussion, JP Madison, and then we'll go to JP Simons.
Let me tell you, I'm not excited about the prospect of having to expand our jail. Putting the word excited in the context of a jail expansion is just wrong somehow. Let me first say that I don't blame Sheriff Helder for coming back to us to say, again, he's got a problem at the jail, because for 2, 3, 4 years, this court has not helped him. 2 years ago, mostly, this Quorum court didn't care about that supposed constitutional duty to run the jail. They said, oh no, we're not going to expand the jail, that costs too much. Why? Because at that time, it would require raising taxes. We would have had to ask for a sales tax to pay for the expansion. What's changed since then? Nothing, except partisan politics have come into this, and folks have decided, oh, we can do this now without raising taxes. We can look good to our people and expand the jail, which we wanted to do all along, but not raise taxes because we can use this money that the feds have given us to help people in a pandemic. So I'll be clear. I support the sheriff. I support the frustration that he has. He can't implement criminal justice reform measures. His job is to protect the inmates, protect the employees at the jail, run the jail. And this court has failed him in helping him. 2 years ago, we funded a criminal justice study. What has come out of it? What have we implemented? We were going to do texting. We were going to do ankle monitors. We were going to do all these things. None of that's happened. We got a pass because COVID resulted in a decline in population at the jail, but it's back up. He's having to quarantine people. He's having to have more people sleep on the floor, so I don't blame him for coming to us. But this court is taking the easy way out. Spending money meant for the citizens to do something they didn't have the courage to do 2 years ago because it would have required raising taxes. So we need to look at the criminal justice reform measures, implement them, see what the backlog is. As I sit here as a practicing attorney in Washington County, it's the last thing I want to do is to disparage any of our sitting circuit judges, but Washington County is at the bottom when we talk about case closures statewide. We are not efficiently closing cases in Washington County. I don't know why that is. It may be things beyond the control of our judges, but until we can get to the top of the list, this is not a problem with overcrowding at the jail. Benton County, they're at the top of closing their cases. They have the same COVID situation we do. They're not having to expand their jail. So I move to table this.
There's a motion on the floor. There's a motion to table, a second motion on the floor to table the discussion on item 16, and second by JP, was that Hires? Second by JP Hires. We'll go ahead and take a vote. Ms. Patty, will you go ahead and take a vote on the table of the motion, table on item 16?
Does there need to be a time table to a certain time?
There was a motion to table indefinitely. Is that your second? Second. So table indefinitely the item 16. Go ahead, Ms. Patty.
Eva Madison? Yes. Robert Dennis?
No.
Suki Hires? Yes. Evelyn Rio Stafford? Yes. Willie Lemming? No. Jim Wilson? No. Butch Pond?
No.
Lance Johnson?
No.
Shannon Marty? No. Sean Simons?
No.
Bill Usry?
No.
Patrick Deakins?
No.
Lisa Ecke? No. Sam Duncan?
No.
Shonda Washington?
Yes.
The motion fails.
All right, with that, the motion fails. JP Simon, so we're still having discussion on item 16. JP Simon?
Thank you, Judge. So I've got a question, but first I think it's important to point out this is a modification, proposed modification, not an expansion. I don't believe this adds a single bed to the jail. It just expands intake, storage, and administrative, and a couple other different areas. At least from the renderings that I saw, I'd like input. I'd like more information on that. But my question is, going back, somebody mentioned in public comment, this nice round number of 250,000 keeps coming up in all these ordinances. Any money that's not spent on architectural up to this 250 limit, does that flow back to?
That's correct.
Us? Okay.
JP Johnson?
Thank you, Judge. 3 or 4 things. I think this problem is only going to be solved by doing all of the things that the criminal justice study told us, but also by extending the jail. And I think the items that the criminal justice study suggested are going to happen slowly. If we can't provide a provider for the crisis stabilization unit, where are we going to find a provider for all the other things? So I think we've got to get some work done at the jail so we can get back to the point where we can transport detainees to the courthouse for their trial. The other thing, I understand that the previous court stopped the expansion, but the court prior to that also stopped the expansion. At the 2018 December meeting, I was sitting in the front row, and there was an ordinance on the agenda to take it to the taxpayers to vote on it, and the 2018 court killed it. Thank you.
J.P. Rio Stafford.
Thank you, Judge Wood. In 20, this was before my time on the Quorum Court, but in 2019, the court decided to move ahead with the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee to look at criminal justice reform at top to bottom through a whole system. And they came out with a report last year that listed a long list of ways to reduce the overcrowding at the jail. Hardly any of those have been put into place. And I've been in contact with Stan Edelman, who was the former jail ombudsman, who sent me a few things, and he's been in contact, I know, with some of the other JPs. Basically his concern is that moving forward with this, before moving forward with the things that we know need to happen because of the report, could take the wind out of the sails of the work of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee. So we have the known knowns, which is we know what needs to happen based on the report. Working on keeping people out of jail because of substance abuse, diversionary things, keeping people out of the jail because of who are having mental health issues, and reducing that high number of people who are in there for failure to appear in court. We heard at the beginning of this, one of our public commenters that, out of, I think, about 600 people who are in the jail right now, 216 are there for failure to appear. That's a quarter of the jail population, it sounds like, right now. So I feel like we're putting the cart before the horse. We know those things need to happen. What we don't know yet is whether once we put those things into place, how much of an expansion of the jail needs to happen, if any. So I think we need to take these, we need to think about the order of operations here. We need to put in place the criminal justice reform first that has been recommended to us by the Center for State Courts, independent outside agency, nonpartisan, before we look at moving forward with expansion.
J.P. Washington, and then J.P. Ussery.
Thank you, Judge Wood. I would just like to ask for clarification because two different things have been said during this discussion. Is this a modification or is this an expansion? Because those are two very different things. So if it's a modification, then how does that help us to socially distance? How does that help with COVID? So I just want, from my own clarification, is this an expansion or modification? Because two different things have been said.
Do we have anyone from the Sheriff's Office? Cantrell, you just want to talk about that?
Good evening, Judge. Jay Cantrell with the Sheriff's Office. Our proposal that we proposed to the Jail Law Enforcement Courts Committee had approximately 230 additional beds in two separate buildings, minimum security buildings, and then the modification to the intake and release area, modification to the medical holding area, and a modification to the courtroom that we currently have in the jail.
And part of that, go ahead and elaborate on the isolation piece of it. So if you don't have a pod to isolate, same thing in the juvenile court, why we would have additional beds to quarantine if you need to isolate some of those.
Right. Our thought is that we have smaller cell blocks that hold fewer people, that we can actually manage our quarantine area better. You know, today we only have 35 positives today. I say only because we've been much higher than that, but we have 385 that are in some form of quarantine or isolation because of those 35 positives. They've either been exposed or somebody we're having to monitor to make sure that they're not going to become positive. So, over half of our population is in some type of quarantine or isolation right now. So we just don't have any room to move people around, and to maybe it was only a few people that got exposed to a positive, but we don't have any small areas to house those. So our thought is to get some smaller cell blocks, smaller housing units that we can isolate these people into smaller groups and try to keep the COVID at bay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question. So it seems like it is more of an expansion. So after this is completed, then how do we support the maintenance? How do we support the staffing? How do we support any other needs that arrive, especially after we've exhausted the $23 million? Then what do we do? How do we support an expansion?
Well, we're still in the infancy of this whole project, and so these drawings that we submitted to the court for their purview is just some drawings we did in-house. So they're not anything that's been vetted by an architect or any type of drawings like that. So maybe some design capabilities that we can utilize that reduces our staffing needs, some things that the architect might be able to advise us on to reconfigure stuff. So we haven't even delved into the staffing part of it. We're just looking at space and how we can best manage our jail population.
Okay, thank you. And that question really wasn't meant for you. It was directed to my colleagues for us to consider how do we support this financially. So, but thank you for answering.
Thank you, J.P. Washington. Thank you, Andrea. I appreciate it. J.P. Ussery.
Thank you very much, Judge. A couple things. One is can has been kicked down the road a lot for quite some time. I was on the court in 2018. We managed to kick the can down the road then. If we pass this tonight, it will be 18 months to 2 years before we see one additional bed at the jail. All we have to do is look at the population of Northwest Arkansas. It's growing, and it's growing rapidly. And so we've got to prepare for that growth. The second thing is that this is as COVID-related as you can get, because the reason that we need to expand the jail, part of it is, as he just said, we have no room in the jail because of COVID. And then the third thing is that in our jail right now, we have a lot of people that are bad people because we've not been able to have any of the criminal courts for the last year and a half. And so the population in there, as people commit murders and do things, they're put in there with no place to go. And that number keeps rising. And it's going to continue to rise until we get this thing sorted out. And so this is just to get us started. And this is again, to start this process that we need to protect the citizens of Northwest Arkansas the way that we're actually required to by the Constitution. Thank you.
J.P. Ussery, J.P. Hires.
Thank you, Judge. I have a couple of questions. One of those, so I'm wondering about the timeline of how long a project like this would take, because if we're talking about 18 months to 2 years, we're not really talking about COVID relief. I'm assuming that we're going to be out of this at that point. And so the question I have is this actually COVID relief that we're looking at because the crisis is happening now, or is this a project that we've been wanting to do for years, and I say we loosely, but that has been wanted for years, and now we have the funding to do it? So that's one kind of question I have. The other thing I wanted to bring up is echoing what J.P. Washington brought up. We're not really talking about how we would pay to operate something like this after we paid to expand it. So where's the staffing going to come from? Where are the funds going to come from to operate something like that? And I feel like it needs to be part of the conversation if we're going to start into spending money to expand the jail. I'm concerned about this. So, I came into this court in 2018. This was the big thing that was happening in 2018. We worked hard with our citizens to get all of these ideas to reform and to reduce the population of the jail. I'm not seeing a lot of movement on that front anymore. And I think that there's just so many other things that we could use to reduce that population. We could use this money to help our citizens with mental health issues, substance abuse, homelessness, open the crisis stabilization unit again, and use the funds in a way that's going to help us to keep that population of the jail that we can have an effect a lot sooner than expansion. Thanks.
JP Lemming. JP Lemming.
All that sounds good, but I mean, if you bring the CSU back up, I think it takes about $1 million. I don't know exactly the number, how much it costs per month or per week or per year to run that, but you're gonna have to go to the taxpayers and ask for tax money to take care of that business too. I mean, there's a lot of things we're talking about trying to do, but it goes back to the taxpayers is gonna have to pay all of it, because we, the people, runs this whole country, statewide, United States, everywhere. So there's no magical wand to any of this, but we all know the population around northwest Arkansas is triple. Benton County, Washington County, Crawford County, everywhere. So we do know that population is growing as much as it is. We do know our jail is the same size as it's been since it was built. And so we do know we're gonna have to build a bigger jail, because it's just the way the population's going, just the way the world's going. So I'm gonna say yes to this, to get the study done, to get the ball rolling. And I'm gonna say after that, we need to back up and let's talk about the rest of the money we spend and go forth from there. Thank you.
JP Ecke and then JP Rio Stafford.
Thank you, Judge. I just want to let the court know and the public that we have already engaged in conversation with law enforcement at the jail on how they're going to, what personnel are they going to need to staff this expansion and what it's going to cost. And we've also had a discussion with Judge Stacy Zimmerman and Judge Warren on their staffing needs. So even though we haven't had a meeting and y'all don't know about it, there are works behind the scene that we're going to work on all of that and how much it's going to cost and what are the positions.
Go ahead.
So it's to be transparent and let everybody know that we're working on it. And excuse me. Thank you. This just came about this month. Personnel already had their meeting for the month. And our meeting was to move the structure of everybody in the county being paid by 10%, moving the structure up to increase the pay. So that way all employees from the roads department to the sheriff's department to the judge's department and everybody else in between has a good living wage. But we only have one committee meeting a month. That was on the agenda. Our agenda for September or even maybe October will be for additional personnel. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, JP Ecke. JP Rio Stafford, and then JP Simon. There you go. Hey.
Still not read. There we are. Okay,
Sorry.
thank you, Judge Wood. I just wanted to note on the question about the cost of one path versus the other path. We know from the 2019 study that talked about that putting people in jail, especially the folks who are low risk, nonviolent individuals, especially all those folks who are in there because of failure to appear in court, that jail is the most expensive option of all, because you gotta take care of them 24/7, you gotta feed them, you gotta watch over them, you gotta pay, you're housing them basically. And that the alternatives are much more cost effective, and they keep people out of the revolving door of coming back in jail over and over again. So to get people out of the system and to not put them in jail in the first place and get them on the right path is way more cost-effective to the taxpayers of this county.
JP Madison and then JP Pond.
Thank you,
JP
Judge.
Madison, then JP Pond.
The reason we haven't discussed this in any other committees is because it wasn't even on the agenda at the committee that it was brought up at. This is the first meeting this has actually appeared on an agenda, and we're poised to spend $250,000 to approve it on very little notice, which apparently the only substantive discussions are happening behind the scenes outside of a public meeting. But let me say this, we are very much at a fork in the road. What I've heard is the population of Washington County is growing, so suddenly we need to lock up all the new people that come into town? Or do we want to bring those people in?
Again, we want to hear from the JPs, we want to hear from you. I'm asking again, you showed the quorum.
Or do we
Thank
want
you.
to bring those people in to Washington County and give them a good job with more than a road department employee makes, with a safe place to live, with good utilities, with good schools, with good childcare? Is that what we want to do? Or do we want to just say, oh, population's increasing, got to build more jail beds? We're at a fork in the road. We are here to decide, are we a county of incarcerating, or are we a county of rehabilitating? Are we concerned about mental health? Are we concerned about helping people get out of poverty? Or do we just want to lock them up? And I am disturbed at what I've heard is the priority of this court. So all of you that are here that care about this, that managed to figure it out, even though it's the first time it was on the agenda, I commend you. Please, please vote in the next election. That will be the only way this will change.
JP Pond. Chair. JP Pond.
Well, neighborhood safety should be number one. And I'm going to tell you, when I receive calls and actual one-on-one, person-to-person visits with individuals, and I'm just talking about in my district, and I doubt it's much different in any of the other rural districts, stolen vehicles, and I mean expensive farm trucks, nice trucks, more than one or two, stolen farm equipment. When they find this stuff, they know it was stolen for drug use purposes. They're gonna hawk this, or they use it to haul stuff away.
Again,
actually-
JP Pond, slow down. Citizens of Washington County, I mean, again, for the last time, will you guys please show respect for the JPs as they talk? Because we want to share that same decorum when you come and speak. Don't talk over them, so when you come, they're not talking over you. Will you do that?
This
JP
is
Pond?
not, yeah, this is not something that I just woke up and saw 2 or 3 days ago. I've been talking about this for years. The last situation, an individual probably partaking of too many illegal drugs. I'm just gonna say probably. I could get that verified. Shot up her neighborhood. Killed 2 of her neighbor's horses, killed the dog, shot the windows out, shot the barn to pieces. They just had finished upgrading their home that they young couple plan on living in for quite some time. Very proud of their animals that are no longer with them. Just ready to start paying on the home improvement loan, and now this young lady, she's not sure she would ever be able to spend the night in that home. I just kind of wonder how people can ignore that kind of stuff. Some of the people in that neighborhood might have thought, well, if the jail's is plenty big, y'all are just letting the wrong ones out. Well, hey, that shouldn't even be laughed about. That's not the first victim that told me y'all are letting the wrong ones out. Just depends on whether it's happened to you yet, whether you think we're letting the wrong ones out. This has just gone on way too long. Obviously, I'm gonna be voting for this. And I do have concern about the people that work down there. I have concern about the people incarcerated there. And they deserve to have a little distancing just like everybody else. They are treated with as much respect and dignity as possible while they're staying with us. Believe it or not. Get to know some of your employees at the county jail. They're very decent people. We have no choice. There are certain people you cannot leave out in the public because they wind up preying on elderly people, whoever they can. Something has to be done. And I'm not, obviously not for continuing to kick this can down the road, and I think if you look back, you'll see that I never was. Now, and I appreciate the ones of you that'll stand up for this and finally do something about it. Thank you.
J.B. Pine. J.P. Deacons.
I think we all have to make a commitment among my colleagues to sometimes, we got to get to the truth. This has been, I believe this is the third agenda that this item's been on. This moved through jails and budget. So, I think that's a little bit of a record that I needed to clear up for the public, that this has been well on agendas for quite a while now. Thank you, Judge Wood.
All right, J.P. Simons, we're going to take this as the last before we go to public comments.
Thank you, Judge. This is obviously a very complex and multifaceted issue, and this idea of we're at a forks in the road, a dichotomy of this or that, I feel like is a gross oversimplification. J.P. Lemming said there is no magic wand to this issue. It's a complex issue, and it's going to require a complex and innovative solution. So we need to stop looking at this as a, should we do this or that? I see this solution being comprised of the CSU, robust pretrial services, FTA reminder systems to help prevent this crisis of a volume of FTAs in our system, addressing out-of-county detainees. We're holding people that aren't Washington County residents. I understand there's a cost factor involved in that, but we need to be leveraging the relationships we have with our state's legislators, our senators, and our representatives. Why isn't the state kicking in the full funding it takes to house and feed their inmates in our jail? There's so much more. We have the criminal justice system that we've been given an outline. We need to take some of that, but it's going to take infrastructure and resources to efficiently address this issue.
Public comments.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Derek Van Vost. I live in Springdale, Arkansas. It's actually kind of shocking. I travel around the country and do things. I speak in places, and I spoke in Selma, Alabama a few weeks back, for example, and they have 20,000 people, and they have 4 youth centers with 20,000 people. I live in Springdale, and I've been approached by the Marshallese Consulate and several other people because there's nothing for their youth to do. Springdale, Arkansas is 80-something thousand people. We don't even have basketball gyms. We don't have, we have basketball courts. You know, the courts are gone. There's no courts. And we talk about hard times, all right? And then you have the Jones Center that kind of went private. And then we have our city, and it's kind of, you know, no one goes there for the new thing, right? So there's nothing for the kids. It's almost sad to hear somebody say they're excited about a jail. As a human who has family members that's been in and out of jail, it's hurtful. And I want to personally apologize for your friends, horses and animals who've been harmed. But I want to remind you, there's 53 Marshallese who lost their lives in just Springdale alone in a few months working at a chicken factory. I don't mean to rub that in. But maybe it's just me. This wasn't a written speech. I'm just a human. I'm not Democrat or Republican. I could care less. I'm a human. And it's disgusting. It's disgusting to see us want to throw people in jail when we all know that jail, JP Deacons, can you pay attention? Okay. No, I'm just
right here.
You talked about disrespect. Yes, sir.
JP.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Direct you, just talk to me.
No.
What's the point of order? JP Dennis. Okay.
Are you okay? Is everything?
Come on.
I'm sorry. I
Come on.
apologize.
Both talk to me.
Okay. So, I mean, my concern is we all know in society that jail is almost a throwaway. And have we gotten to the point where we're just giving up on people? I'm not saying we don't need jail. I don't know the situation, but I know we don't need to give up on people. There's got to be just another way. There's got to be another way to do things, to spend this money. To youth development, I own Building Bridges. It's a youth development program. There is no possible way we can mentor all the kids that we have. There's no possible way. In Springdale alone, there's 5,200 kids that go from 0 to 1 meal from Friday afternoon to Monday morning. That's during school. I don't have the answers, and I didn't come to cause trouble or say I really have an opinion. But all we've talked about is jail.
All right, Mr. Bose, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Public comments and let's go ahead and have, are you speaking in support of?
No, sir.
Okay, let's have someone who's going to speak in support of.
Where does that requirement appear?
It's not a requirement.
Okay.
It's not a requirement.
Then
Come on.
point of
That-
order.
pardon me?
Point of order.
Point of order, what's the point of order?
Where is it in county ordinance we have to alternate yes or no?
It's-
People have been in line.
It's Robert rules, which you guys have adopted.
To the section in Robert's rules.
Can we pull, do we have the Robert rule? We don't have that. Go ahead. We have a second on the point of order?
You don't have to have a second on the point of order.
Well, I don't have the Robert rules, so go ahead, young lady. Will you wait, Miss Ann? Miss Ann? Miss-
Thank you very much. I wanted to come out.
Miss Ann, hold tight. Let's go ahead and have the other lady come in. I don't have my Robert rules in front of me. Come on in. I know, I don't have it. Go ahead. I mean, but do we have it and can we cite it? I know, but I don't have it in front of me to cite it. So, okay, let's go. Go ahead. Tell us who you are and where you're from.
My name is Sophia Dugweiler. I live here in Fayetteville. I just wanted to speak to the story that was told earlier, and I really empathize with that. Drugs take a toll on our community every day. And so, you know, I work in the recovery community with women post-incarceration, and I know their stories, and it's very disheartening. I also have a story of my own. I was addicted to drugs and alcohol for the majority of my adult life, and I did my first stint in prison in 2010 for nonviolent drug offenses. I did 11 months incarcerated, was released with very little support, very little supervision, no idea how to live life without drugs and alcohol as a responsible adult. I soon relapsed. I went back to prison 3 times because I couldn't figure it out, and I had no support. I didn't know where to look for support. It wasn't until I went to the Women's ACC here in Fayetteville where I received the first treatment that I had access to, or was or more specifically was implemented by the government, by the criminal justice system. I was very successful there. I received treatment for my mental health, for my drug addiction, for my trauma. They paved the way for me to transition into transitional living, where then I was able to implement those skills and become a contributing member of the community. And today I use my experience to help other women who are going through that same thing, who have also been through this vicious cycle over and over. I just want to say that I believe that the best way to alleviate the overcrowding and over-incarceration is to invest in the people. I went through the prison system for 8 years. I never received a mental health evaluation. I never was required to go to drug treatment classes. There was at one point where I went and saw my parole officer every month, told them that I had a problem with alcohol. I couldn't stay sober, and so he wouldn't drug test me so I wouldn't fail. He didn't offer me any treatment. I work with social workers today, and they've taught me the value of science. Well, I mean, I guess I've always believed in science, but they taught me the value of research, evidence-based practices, all of these tools that have been implemented to help us find real solutions. And it sounds like we have those, but that's not what we're working towards. I'd like to see the Quorum Court take the public comment into consideration, to take science, data, research, analysis into consideration, and at least hold off until we've really considered those. I don't understand why this is being pushed through today. When the gentleman who came up here to represent the sheriff's office didn't even realize that they had had meetings about who's going to staff this new facility. Thank you.
Public comments? Public comments?
Hi, Erin Moody, Fayetteville. I've sat through a number of these meetings. I'm relatively involved in the Quorum Court and trying to understand exactly what goes on here on a monthly, weekly. I know you guys meet quite often in various committees. I can honestly say that I have lost a lot of trust in this court. I know that you guys are working really hard, and you say you want to compromise, and you say you want to talk to a number of different opinions and do the research and find out what you should do with this money, but that's not what's been happening. That's not the way you've been voting. And it goes back to the CARES funding, where we had a long time to figure out what to do with $4.5 million, and you've spent 1.1 on miscellaneous and haphazard expenses that are considered to be COVID relief expenses, but from where I sit as a citizen, I don't quite see that. And now this evening, you're going to vote to move that money, the rest of it, $3.4 million, into a general fund where it's not going to be spent on COVID relief, which is what it was meant for. So we sit here today to talk about this $250,000 from the American Rescue Plan, and you've not talked about what you're going to do with the rest of it. You're getting $23 million this year, you're going to get $23 million next year, and you're deciding quickly on a whim to use it to expand the jail. That's going to cost us even more money down the road. Now, if after discussion with the community and a strategic and organized plan is brought to the community, and then you decide, yes, we need to use this money to expand the jail, that's a different conversation. But today, all you're doing is making assumptions, not bringing facts, and voting on your opinion that doesn't seem to be based in anything. So I ask you to please think about that as you're deciding to spend our taxpayer money on something that you don't know enough about in the first place. And I'm talking about the entire amount of money that we will be getting from the American Rescue Plan. It should not be used to expand the jail. We're not going to solve the incarceration issue in this country in this meeting tonight. But you can vote against $250,000 going towards starting a project where you don't know enough about it, and it has nothing to do with COVID. Thank you.
Public comment. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Alyssa Allen. I am also a resident of Fayetteville, and I would just like to begin by echoing the sentiments of my fellow constituent. I feel that it's very unfair that y'all are making a decision for Fayetteville residents and for the residents of Washington County and choosing to let them stay in poverty. As you just heard, you spent over $1 million in not rental assistance and not food assistance and miscellaneous stuff. And I feel like it's really unfair to all those kids in beds, or maybe not in beds because their parents are in poverty, to say that they don't deserve that aid, that they don't deserve the rental aid that you should disperse to their parents, that we should be spending that on a jail instead so we can incarcerate their father or their mother so that they can't go to their job, so that they can't feed their families, so then they're forced to commit crimes so that they can feed their families. I come from one parent because my dad died of a heroin overdose. And I have seen poverty, I have seen incarceration, and I have seen the detrimental effect that it has on the developing brain and on the developed brain. And I feel that it's very unfair to choose to incarcerate people instead of offering them rehabilitative services whenever you are also choosing to put them in the poverty that leads them to commit these crimes. It's not okay. And we need to humanize those who are incarcerated. They are humans too. And as for the people who have things stolen from their farms, my grandma has had tens of thousands of dollars stolen from her farm and farm equipment and copper wire and all that stuff. And you know what the cops up in Benton County say? I don't know what y'all do around here, but up in Benton County, they just dismiss it. And maybe it's just because my grandma is a single woman running a farm. Maybe we take it a little bit more seriously if there's a man involved. But my grandma has been dismissed over and over again. And as far as dangerous people, I have a restraining order on my only living parent. And you know how long she's ever spent in jail? Less than 2 weeks. Over and over and over again. Murder attempts have been literally dismissed by Benton County Jail. I don't know how y'all do it, but I hope it's not like that. And I just think that if you guys are going to make a decision to spend $250,000, you got to consider feeding children. You got to consider housing them. You got to consider the detrimental effect that taking that income from a family who is already struggling has on not only the person you're trying to punish, but those kids. How are they going to focus in school? How are they going to do good for themselves? You're putting this path, you're repeating this cycle of incarceration over and over again, and you guys should not be able to make that decision for the future leaders of our nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comments?
Sam Costner, West Fork. I realize that feelings are big over this, and this ordinance does not dehumanize anyone if it gives beds where it's needed. This ordinance doesn't mean that other things can't be done, but on that agenda, I don't see an ordinance to properly replace it. And additionally, forgive me. Anyone who is familiar with the situation at the jail knows that the need is axiomatic on its face. And the pandemic has, without question, exacerbated the situation. And the Sheriff's Department has languished long enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comments. We have 10 minutes left in public comments.
Hello, my name is Ann Britton, and I want to say I've followed the Quorum Court since I moved here 30-some years ago. And I do remember back in 2018 when you all were talking about doing the tax increase. And somebody here has said that nothing has changed. Well, something has changed. We got some COVID relief money. Now, I appreciate everyone's feelings on this, but it doesn't preempt the fact that the county is not running a church service here. We are not rehabilitating. That's not your primary job. Your primary job is to protect the innocent citizen And to expand the jail, it only makes sense right now when we have so much population coming into Northwest Arkansas, and with the borders wide open, we have to face the facts that that is going to be a problem. Other nations are letting out their jails. We're going to need some expansion. It's a very sorry thing to have to say, but it's the truth. I think that people need to look to churches and charitable organizations for helping people that need that help to get sober, that need mental health care. I've worked with people with mental health care. I've worked in the psychiatric industry my whole entire adult life. And government is not the answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Public comments? Good evening.
Hello, my name is Jason Connolly.
Give me 1 second here. JP Washington and then JP Rios.
I move that public comment be extended so that every person who's standing in line can have their 3 minutes to speak, who's already currently in line.
Yes, second. All in favor of extending until the line is completed? All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it. Go ahead.
Jason Conley, I live in Springdale, Arkansas. I've heard a lot of people say that they're tired of partisan politics. However, this issue is clearly about partisan politics. There's been a lot of people who've claimed that they're worried about finances, but instead this is about partisan politics. It's about two very different views about how the government needs to interact with what's going on in the crime situation around us. There is a view that's being assumed by many people here that has to do with reimagining society without jails, reimagining society without police. Well, that's not the society we live in, and that's not what we're voting on. There are people here who think you can replace police with counselors. That's not a reality. That's not how the situation works. A lot of these people who are saying these things are not considering the victims of the crime. They think that the criminals are the victims rather than the citizens on whom crime is perpetrated. And the people who will be most affected if the jails are not given enough space and are not maintained enough, and the law enforcement officers are not given enough resources to do what they need to do, are the poorest communities around us. Those will be the people who are most affected. Those will be the people who will call the police and not have something happen because there's not enough room in the jails. The poorest communities around us. You can't just let everyone out of jail or keep anyone from going to jail just because you don't like the idea of jail. There are laws and there are criminals who break those laws, and there are jails for those situations, and that is what is being voted on. The government, as the previous person at this chair said, the government is not run like a charity. The government is not responsible for rehabilitating people. That is not how our society works. The government is responsible for protecting the citizenry. There are other parts of society who can do things like charity, rehabilitation, counseling, and so on. Thank you for hearing my comments.
Thank you. Public comments?
Gladys Tiffany, Fayetteville. There really was a time when the Quorum Court was allowed to see its main role as a caring place for roads and jails. And the public allowed you to do that in a time that used to be normal. But that time is gone now, and the court needs to understand how things have changed. The public is coming to you now for critical needs that the old normal is already past. Now we're having crisis upon crisis, and the county needs to gird itself to cope with the different situation we find ourselves in now than we did just a few years ago. This is exemplified by the impact of COVID in our county, and the vacuity of the response from the Quorum Court is exemplified by the unfortunate statement repeated by several justices before you voted to create the rainy day fund out of the COVID relief money. The idea of holding money meant to cope with an ongoing catastrophe for some future catastrophe was a mockery of the needy people in rural Washington County, especially as you continue to reveal your true intent by spending this money to build the jail before a committee you yourself convened can report on significant policy suggestions to mitigate and streamline its problems. So many people are in deep need. Growing homelessness and hunger are still right here in Washington County. There are so many potential ways those needs could be helped, and there are good people right here today making valid suggestions to make things better. But the court majority is adamant that the only help you can imagine for people dumped into poverty is a bigger jail to lock them up in when they're forced into desperate measures to survive. There are better ways for government to work for the people. This leaves me with the conclusion that some of our justices are too complacent to lead at a time of great crisis like we are living in now. Some of you appear to have no capacity to care or even notice what others are enduring. And you're not demonstrating a capacity to imagine ways to effectively help them, let alone implementing any of the good solutions being proposed. As long as this is the situation, it is important that you hear from us, the public, about how we see the way you are managing our county government.
Thank you. Public comments?
Josh Moody, Fayetteville. I actually wasn't planning on speaking again, but I just wanted to reiterate and address certain things. So yes, it is a 230-bed expansion that will be completed after COVID has passed us, so it's not a COVID-related issue. I assume that some justices have not ever met anybody accused of murder. I have. I've worked with some of those people, and I assure you that they are just as human as you and I are. Now, but that's not to conflate the issue down here. I think we might be thinking of maximum security prisons or something like that, not the county jail. The vast majority of county jail people detained currently are they're pre-trial. That means innocent until proven guilty. As mentioned earlier, a large chunk of those are failure to appear. Another large chunk of those are nonviolent drug offenses. I would like to address that meeting behind the scenes is the exact opposite of transparency. Also, yes, grand theft auto is a concern here, and that's a concern due to lack of opportunity, not because of evil and boogeymen. I know countless kids who have either stolen vehicles or have broken into cars to steal money out so that they could eat. Stolen vehicles for somebody else telling them they have to go do this, and they're doing that because of lack of opportunity. It's because they have to help take care of their families. Sadly, 12-year-olds are put in that position. So to say that, oh, everybody's bad that commits a crime, that's ridiculous and completely inaccurate. Was there anything else I was hoping to say? Oh, Judge Wood, I hope you heard all that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Public comments?
My name is Solomon Birchfield. I live on South Washington here in Fayetteville. Part of the reason that I'm here today healthy and employed and relatively happy is that I had support as a young person. I had care. Probably each of you would point to your family, like me, to the faith community that surrounded us, but also my city, my county, my state, my nation. My family used a rental assistance voucher when I was young. That's part of what kept me in a home. My first job was with a program called the Job Training Partnership Act, JTPA. That was my first kind of employment. It helped me earn money and get an education. We all depend on this kind of support, these care systems that invest into us. Just like the plants in our garden at home, when a plant has the sunlight, has the soil, has the water, has someone caring for it, it thrives. So just like me and you, we depend on these systems of care. When our community care systems are weak, or if there's a gap in them, there is no amount of jails and officers and surveillance bracelets that can keep us healthy and safe. The logic of the community is growing, so we should explode the size of the jail and the budgets of coercive systems that step in and react to problems in the community. That logic has run its course. Over the last 40 and 50 years, we've already tried that over and over again, applying that logic, and the result is a bloated, ineffective criminal justice system that we have today. So now, the pandemic functions like a storm where it exposes the places our community is vulnerable, where there's pain and where there's poverty and where there's people that have unmet support needs. And here's a chance with money to try to fund things that care for people, things that were in that assessment that you've mentioned tonight, courts of diversion. There's a price tag for that. Pretrial services, there's a price tag for that. Supportive housing for people who've been chronically homeless and are high-frequency utilizers of the justice system. There's programs that work for that, but there's a price tag. So there's a chance for us to invest in communities of care. Instead of putting a $250,000 down payment on a $20 million over-investment in an already bloated, ineffective system. I know many of you may already have
All right, Mr. Birchfield, go
your
ahead and wrap
mind
it up.
made up, but to siphon money out of our community care systems and into this system is a sin against our neighbor. So I'm asking you to vote no as a way of loving yours.
If I have some time, my name is Colby Fulford, and I'm a resident of Springdale, and I'm speaking to you as a resident this evening. I'll say this. I'll start out by saying this. I think there's been a lot of comments from different sides of the aisle that I agree with on both sides. I think there is reform that needs to be looked at. I think we can all agree that there are people who are in our prison system that should not be. There's also people that need to be because of violent crimes. As a resident of Springdale, recently I read a news article concerning Officer Apple, who was killed in Pea Ridge. He died in a tragic situation where someone who had been released multiple times, I believe the newspaper had stated 9 times, had not been violent before, but at that moment, for whatever reason, became violent, and the officer was killed. There was another situation on Joyce recently where there was a standoff situation. Firearms were discharged. The SWAT team was called in after hours. Part of our Springdale SWAT team was there on the scene. We had firearms that were discharged. Some of the public was watching the events unfold, and I would say that the public was in danger that evening. I find out later that this gentleman, the suspect, was previously arrested just a few months prior. I don't know all the specifics, but the newspaper referenced he had 8.5 pounds of methamphetamine. He was also arrested, according to the paper, in something connected with a shooting. And I will agree with people who made the comments tonight. There are some things that I think we do need reform on, but there are other instances. We have people that are being released that have accumulated 3 and 4 DWIs.
the public is at danger when people are continuously released, OR, there's no penalty to continue to drink and drive. It puts all of us at danger. You had 118 people who were arrested last year twice on domestic violence charges. Now, that's not all your domestic violence charges. That's just people who were rearrested for the same thing in 1 year, 118 individuals. And I would ask everyone to put themselves in the position of the abused, the victims, to say, how would we feel knowing that they're going to be arrested and they're going to be released on OR and come back to the same home? That's not protecting innocent lives within our community. I don't know if I have any more time.
Just wrap it up.
I'll say this. Every one of our public officials takes an oath. They raise their hand and they affirm to defend the Constitution of the United States. And that Constitution requires 5 things from each and every one of you. And that is to establish justice. I think we need to find justice on both ends of all the arguments that were made tonight. We ensure the domestic tranquility, and I can promise you some of the things that I've heard from our police chief and from our judge and from your sheriff. I don't have domestic tranquility when I can't let my kids play out in the front yard.
All right, Mr.
Because
Fulfer.
of someone very violent who had been pulled over next to my home. We can go all through all the points, but we are all charged as you take an oath of office to defend the Constitution and the 5 things required of you in the preamble of the Constitution.
Thank you.
I think we need to look at all angles, and I
Thank
don't
you,
care
Mr.
where the
Fulfer.
funding comes from.
Mr. Fulfer,
I
I'm gonna
think
touch
for the
your mic.
residents of Springdale, we want to see something done.
Thank you. Ms. Patty, this is on item 16. Ms. Patty, take the roll.
I'm not sure why the voting thing's not working on the computer, but Eva Madison. No. Robert Dennis. Yes. Suki Hires. No. Evelyn Rio Stafford. No. Willie Lemming. Jim Wilson. Yes. Butch Pond. Yes. Lance Johnson. Yes. Shannon Marty. Yes. Sean Simons. Yes. Bill Usry. Yes. Patrick Deakins. Yes. Lisa Ecke. Yes. Sam Duncan. Yes. Shonda Washington. No. This ordinance passes.
All right, item 16 passes. Item 17. Counselor, will you read that one by title only? Oh, go 1 second. Okay, go ahead.
An ordinance de-appropriating surplus amounts from full-time salaries for various departments and restoring those amounts to unappropriated reserves as required by the 2021 budget controls for the second quarter of 2021.
J.P. Deakins.
Thank you, Judge Wood. This is our sweep account ordinance that takes unused salary monies and puts them back in the general fund. I move passage of item number 17.
There's a motion by J.P. Deacon, second by J.P. Simons. Discussion? Any discussion? Any public comments? Any public comments? Ms. Patty?
Eva Madison. Yes. Robert Dennis. Yes. Suki Hires. Yes. Evelyn Rio Stafford. Yes. Willie Lemming. Yes. Jim Wilson. Yes. Butch Pond. Yes. Lance Johnson. Yes. Shannon Marty. Yes. Sean Simons. Yes. Bill Usry. Yes. Patrick Deakins. Yes. Lisa Ecke. Yes. Sam Duncan. Yes. Shonda Washington. Yes. This ordinance passes.
All right, thank you, Ms. Patty. Item 18. Counselor, will you read that one by title only?
An ordinance recognizing revenue in the amount of $261,742 in the high-intensity drug trafficking areas HIDA grant fund and appropriating $261,742 from the HIDA grant to the HIDA 2022 G22 GC 0004A budget for 2022.
JP Deacons.
Thank you, Judge. Well, this is a regular recurring grant we get to combat drug trafficking in our area. I move passage of item number 18.
Motion by JP Deacons, a second by JP Ecke for item 18. Any discussion? Any discussion? Public comments? Any public comments? Ms. Patty?
Eva Madison. Robert Dennis. Suki Hires. Evelyn Rio Stafford. Willie Lemming. Jim Wilson. Butch Pond. Lance Johnson. Shannon Marty. Sean Simons. Bill Usry. Patrick Deacons. Lisa Ecke. Sam Duncan. Shonda Washington. This ordinance passes.
All right, thank you, Ms. Patty. Item 19, Counselor, will you read that one by title only?
An ordinance appropriating the amount of $3,427,272.51 from the Coronavirus Relief Fund 1005 to the General Reserve Fund 1001 for 2021.
JP Duncan.
Thank you, Judge. This is an ordinance to move the remaining funds into the General Reserve Fund. Again, these are reimbursed funds and are not restricted. I move passage of 19.1.
There's a motion by JP Duncan, second by JP Wilson for item 19. Any discussion? JP Madison and then JP Hires.
So in the interest of transparency for those who are still following along, these are reimbursements for expenses that were already budgeted. They were not reimbursements for expenses that were incurred due to COVID. The Trump administration allowed local governments to submit law enforcement salaries as justification to get the money to counties quickly. It was not ever intended to just be
Thank you, Judge. And to me, this is about accountability and transparency. I think I disagree with moving this fund from where it is right now because the public, once it's dumped into the general fund, the public will have no idea how the rest of it is being spent. We've had, over the last few months, hundreds of people contact us about these funds. And to add on to what JP Madison was saying about the origin of these funds, and I brought this up in Budget Committee too, we did not get these funds directly from the federal government. We actually got them from the state of Arkansas. And the state of Arkansas set up a CARES Act steering committee. They're the ones that made the decision to give funds to every county and I think most cities in Arkansas. So it was their call. And, I've gone back and watched, not only have I read their minutes, I've now gone back and watched the video of their meeting back in September, where they made the decision to give us the money. The DFNA Secretary, Larry Walther, was part of this meeting. Governor Hutchinson was there. You can watch the video up on Governor Hutchinson's YouTube channel. Chris Valines, the head of the Arkansas Association of Counties, was there. And I'm going to quote Secretary Walther from the video about what he envisioned counties should be doing with this money. Secretary Walther said, quote, "There's going to be 500 cities and 75 counties that will have access to a certain amount of money, and they will have the ability to look at their local needs on a local basis in the county. And Stone County, for instance, its county judge, who's closest to the issues in that county, can evaluate what these needs are. And it's my understanding that they'll be able to fund food banks, rental assistance, mortgage assistance where it's COVID-related. Things like that lead me to believe that we're going to be able to support these counties to a great degree and assist those citizens in Arkansas who are in need because of this COVID crisis." Those are the words of Secretary Walther in the decision-making process of giving us these funds. So to say that, yes, technically these are unrestricted funds that came to us, but there was a stated purpose for why we got this money. And so, to me, I think so far, a lot of the things that we've spent this on, even though they've been internal to the county, have been, I think everything we spent money on so far has been COVID-related in some way, shape, or form. So in that sense, I feel that we've done a good job to some degree with making sure that there is accountability in how these funds are being spent. But to just move them into the general fund where they're just going to disappear and vanish into all the other money, I think is wrong, and it does a disservice to the taxpayers of this county.
Yes, thank you. Listening to the conversation about this so far, and I kind of get to wondering, people are going to watch this over the internet and different things. I wonder how many folks realize that every year we are audited by state auditors. And they kind of look in on things here and check and see and make sure that monies that we have received are spent appropriately. And I'd just like to remind folks of that when I hear so many indications that, if it gets in there, nobody's ever going to know where it went. That all has to be accounted for, not just by auditors, but anybody else that wants to come in and look in on things, because you're doing the public's business. And I appreciate it. Thank you for letting me blow a little steam there.
J.P. Pine, J.P. Lemming.
How much money has Springdale Housing and Fayetteville Housing got of the $7 million, or what? How much have they?
1.5. I think it's $1.5 million apiece.
1.5. Is that still available for them?
Yes, I think both of them still have some of those dollars. Any other discussion? Public comments? Oh, I'm sorry, J.P. Washington.
Thank you, Judge Wood. So when we discussed this in the Budget and Finance Committee meeting last week, I asked a question, why this amount of money? Why now? And I actually asked if we could table this until we got additional information. And the response was that we have other funds coming through the American Rescue Plan. But what I keep hearing is we only have interim rules for the American Rescue Plan. So if we're counting on being able to do something with those funds that we would have done with these funds, only to find out later that we can't do that, that really puts the county in a bad position. So once again, I would just ask that this be tabled until October, until we've had time to see if, when those interim rules from the, when we will have more specific rules from the American Rescue Plan so that we can better use this money. I think that it is not a good decision to have $3.4 million sitting in the general fund when we have the ability to help the residents of Washington County.
All right, so there's a motion to table about JP Washington until October 2021, and second by JP Madison. Ms. Patty, let's take a roll on tabling until October this particular item 19.
Eva Madison.
Yes.
Robert Dennis.
No.
Suki Hires.
Yes.
Evelyn Rios Stafford.
Yes.
Willie Lemming.
No.
Jim Wilson.
No.
Butch Pond.
No.
Lance Johnson.
No.
Shannon Marty.
No.
Sean Simons. Bill Usry.
No.
Patrick Deakins.
No.
Lisa Ecke.
No.
Sam Duncan.
No.
Chandra Washington.
Yes.
Failed. The motion fails.
All right, so that does not pass the tabling. JP Rio Stafford, and then we'll go on to public comments.
Thank you, Judge Wood. I know that I can't compel my colleagues to speak up, but I'm really curious about why some of my colleagues who back in February made certain statements now appear to be headed in the opposite direction. Back at our February Quorum Court meeting, J.P. Deakins was quoted as saying, "I would like to be very deliberate and dedicated with what we're going to do with these funds, how we're going to spend them," unquote. J.P. Simon at that same meeting said, "I would like to continue to see this to be worked," talking about J.P. Madison's ordinance that was voted down. "I admonish myself and the rest of the JPs to come up with solutions. That's what we're here for. That's what we're elected to do. So I'll be voting no on this particular ordinance, not because of its intent or the spirit behind it, but because it's how it's currently structured. And I will be working to find another solution to bring before the court, another solution," end quote.
With that, we're going to go to public comments. JP Dennis. No, JP Dennis and then JP Wilson. Go ahead.
I apologize. Blood pressure medicine is worn off. I was considering voting no against this after the public comments tonight and one JP posting out and out lies on the internet this morning about 8 o'clock. I've changed my mind, and so due to that, I'm going to vote yes for it. Just wanted to know who persuaded me.
JP Wilson. There you go.
I think it's important to note that there have been changes since earlier in this year. Over $7 million came out for rental assistance, and we have been in the process of issuing that during this year. It is my understanding that has to be spent by the end of the year. That may have changed, but it was my understanding it had to be spent by the end of the year, or we'd have to send it back. So obviously, that happened after some of these conversations. In addition, the American Rescue funds were given out to counties and cities during this year. That happened subsequent to those comments. So I think these unrestricted funds, it just makes sense for us to put them in the general fund and to use them for the benefit of all citizens of this county. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, JP Wilson. Public comments. Public comments?
Gladys Tiffany, Fayetteville. I am really baffled about why it is that part of this court has such a resistance to actually putting a plan together about how to use this money. I'm feeling this huge resistance to actually thinking about what the county needs as a whole and then doing that. Each one of these piecemeal hunks that we're dealing with that seem to be just pulled out of our history and tossed onto the table are not really the kind of a strategic plan for moving our county forward that we're capable of. We have many very smart people in this group, but nobody is actually thinking, how do we actually take care of our people through the crisis we're facing that we are in already? And there's every reason to actually do a comprehensive plan that does have the capacity to accomplish some of these goals, but no one is willing to actually move in that direction. I find this baffling and very, very disappointing in our court.
Thank you. The public comments.
Alyssa Allen, Fayetteville. Thank you guys for letting me speak again on a different thing, of course. But I would just like to implore the court to consider a pro-life solution. There are a lot of JPs here who consider themselves to be pro-life, which probably means that they should care about people after they're born and maybe support the idea that we feed children or make sure that they're housed. And as JP Stafford said, we should be focusing on using this money to support our citizens, to bring them out of the wreckage that COVID has caused their families, to help them through this traumatic situation that we're all unfortunately having to deal with. And I haven't seen much of that other than a jail. That doesn't make much sense to me. I know that you guys got elected for a reason. You guys were compelling. You guys seemed smart enough. Your constituents trusted you. And I'm sure they had their reasons for that, but this is your time to shine. This is your time to show them that you are the problem-solving people you led them to believe you are. This is the time to show them that you care about them, that you care about whether or not they're eating, you care about whether or not they have a house, you care about whether or not they're doing okay. I know that you guys have it in your hearts. I implore you to use them. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comments.
Samuel Rivera Lopez from Springdale. I just, after hearing everybody speak here, I want to show the glaring disparity in youth that happens to be in attendance. There's only a few members probably here that are under 25. Now, I think everybody over 18 can vote. I just don't see a big reach out to people of youth in here. I mean, if you want to talk about juvenile prevention, juvenile detention, but you don't have a juvenile perspective, I feel like it's on the elders to pass that wisdom on to us. I feel like if you want to lead somebody to the water, you got to show them where it's at, right? Well, half the time, like, y'all digging the well, but who's helping us? I mean, if you look at Springdale, for example, a large portion of the people that got infected with COVID in the plants were Latinx and Marshallese. Many of those people passed. What happens to the generational divide that happens to those kids? What happens when they don't have emotional support from their parents? I'm not asking for charity, I'm asking for action. There's a difference. I'm not here telling you how to spend the money. I'm letting you know that there's people in need. Now, what you decide to do with that information is up to you. But it's also, have you seen the majority of the people that are standing here aren't exactly advocating not to fund the police. They're not saying do not do this. They're saying what comes first, what's pragmatic, what's in order. If we're in operations, what is the math? What's logic telling you to do? Not your emotions. What's the solution? What's the proper function? Thank you.
Thank you. Public comments.
Knoxgram, Elm Springs. I'm also under 25. In fact, I go to Harbor High School up in Springdale. I am currently in AP Government and Politics, and we had an interesting discussion about the concept of public goods and what governments are supposed to do today. So for a youth perspective, the general fund, it seems from what I've heard, is supposed to pay for public goods. This money should be used to pay for public goods that the county needs. as has been previously discussed, there are some things that need to be pulled out of the history of the court to be paid for to move our county forward. Those are public goods. This is money to be used for public goods. I don't see the problem.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Public comments. Public comments. Ms. Patty?
Eva Madison. Robert Dennis. Suki Hires. Evelyn Rio Stafford. Willie Lemming. Jim Wilson. Butch Pond. Lance Johnson. Shannon Marty. Sean Simons. Bill Usry. Patrick Deakins. Lisa Ecke. Sam Duncan. Shonda Washington.
No.
This ordinance passes.
Thank you, Ms. Patty. Item, okay, we're on the committees. County Services had no meeting. Finance and Budget, J.P. Deakins.
Reports in the packet.
All righty, J.P. Ecke for Personnel.
Reports in the packet.
All righty, and Jails and Law Enforcement, J.P. Johnson. And with that, meeting is adjourned.